The only way to attack the U.S. is to invade through Mexico or strike from the ocean. Ships won't get close, but long-range missiles can easily reach, and those call for a different kind of defense. On May 20th, U.S. President Donald Trump announced the start of development on a new missile defense system called the Golden Dome. Coffee first, and then let's see how this thing's gonna work. Just an unobtrusive reminder to do that thing under the video. Some experts believe that even a single, relatively small nuclear blast hundreds of miles above Americans' heads would create an extremely dangerous electromagnetic pulse. Because of it, planes would be falling out of the sky all over the country, and all electronics, from headphones and medical devices to water supply systems, would stop working. William Fortune, a writer and weapons researcher at Montreat College in North Carolina, actually thinks it'd feel like being thrown back 1,000 years, and people would have to start from scratch. And on the one hand, the U.S. used to have a great defense system, but on the other, the world is changing. Over the past 30 years, starting with the Gulf War in 1991, U.S. overseas air bases have mostly been safe havens from enemy attacks. From there, American air power could be quickly projected to deter rivals or reassure allies during a crisis. That's why the U.S. Air Force, with its ability to strike when and where needed in response to enemy aggression, has long served as a kind of peace guarantee. But today, that ability is under threat. The thing is, China, for example, has invested heavily in building a sophisticated arsenal of ground-launched ballistic and cruise missiles, and these missiles can easily reach U.S. bases. It's enough to take out the forward air bases, or at least their runways, and deterrence immediately becomes a problem. And in the last 10 years, China's missile forces have gotten a lot more medium and intermediate range ballistic missiles than they used to have. Not to mention ground-launched cruise missiles that can hit targets at huge distances, covering all of Japan and even Guam. This is, for instance, the DF-41, a Chinese solid-fueled, road-mobile, fourth-generation intercontinental ballistic missile. And that's just one of the threats. In November 2024, North Korea showed off a newly tested intercontinental ballistic missile, calling it the most powerful in the world. Sure, you can call anything whatever you like, but the missile North Korea launched flew higher and stayed in the air longer than any other weapon the country had launched before. It was the Hwasong-19, a huge, solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missile. So, even if the missile isn't the most powerful in the world, the launch still signaled that North Korea now has a weapon capable of hitting the U.S. mainland. And then there's space. In 2023, a record-breaking 2,877 spacecraft were launched, and even though most of them came from the U.S., the numbers for China and Europe are going up too. China and Russia have already made progress developing space weapons that can knock out satellites used for navigation, aerial imaging, and long-distance communication. Basically, it's all kind of unsettling, and oceans can't protect the U.S. anymore. For centuries, U.S. national security strategies were built on protecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. But today's weapons have a much longer reach than before. On top of that, all current defense systems were designed to counter North Korea, which means they wouldn't be able to intercept a massive arsenal like the one Russia or China has. For example, new hypersonic missiles are maneuverable, super fast, and operate in a layer of the atmosphere where nothing else really flies. All of that creates a new problem that calls for a new kind of defense approach. So overall, it makes sense to assume that to protect its own country and help out its allies, the U.S. clearly needs some next-level tech. In response to these hypothetical, but according to experts, quite possible threats, U.S. President Donald Trump said in his recent address to Congress that he wants to build a unified air and missile defense system for the whole United States. The statement said that President Ronald Reagan had already tried to build an effective defense against nuclear attacks, and although that program led to many technological breakthroughs, it was scrapped before the goal was reached. This refers to the Strategic Defense Initiative, mockingly dubbed the Star Wars program. It was announced back in 1983 with the main goal of making nuclear weapons obsolete. If the program had worked as intended, it would have put an end to the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, the very one that assumes if one nuclear power starts attacking another, everyone dies. All in all, the idea was good, but back in 1987, the American Physical Society concluded that the tech just wasn't there to pull something like that off. It'd take at least another decade of research just to figure out if such a system was even possible. And now, almost 40 years later, Trump said in his address that all the necessary technologies are finally in place. Still, there are a number of challenges that clearly lie ahead. First of all, a potential enemy might roll out countermeasures to fool many kinds of possible defense systems, or they could just build more offensive nukes to overwhelm them. Also, some experts worry that large-scale deployments of missile defense could kick off an arms race. That adds extra tension. And besides, the size and scope of the proposed defense setup is just plain scary. Missile defense experts describe the task of intercepting long-range nuclear missiles as hitting a bullet with another bullet in the dark. Because the targets are small, they don't emit any radio or infrared signals, and they move really fast. So even the optimistic tech experts admit that a 100% interception rate is unlikely. It's worth mentioning that the U.S. already has a system of ground-based interceptors, mainly in Alaska, but at best, they can shoot down a couple dozen incoming warheads. If the number of intercontinental missiles increases, that really will be a next-level challenge. And this challenge is somehow supposed to be addressed by President Trump's Golden Dome, which, by the way, he wants to put in space. Here's the problem with this idea. A weapon based in low Earth orbit, if it's to have enough range and power to hit ICBMs or SLBMs mid-flight, has to keep moving all the time. That means you'd need up to dozens of units scattered around the globe to make sure one of them ends up in the right place at the right time. The absence factor makes the cost sky high if the system is meant to counter a large-scale synchronized attack. Suppose the absence factor is 20-1, and that's actually pretty good odds. In that case, a country would need 20 satellites in space just to be sure one of them is within the kill zone of enemy nukes at the right moment. And just recently, experts figured out that it would take a constellation of about 16,000 interceptors to fend off a rapid salvo of around 10 solid-fuel ICBMs like North Korea's Hwasong-18. The idea of having 16,000 satellites in orbit used to seem impossible until recently. Today, though, companies like SpaceX are making it happen. They've already launched around 7,000 satellites and plan to send up thousands more. So the idea is technically doable now, but the main issue is the cost. Actually, when Trump first revealed his concept of the Golden Dome during his address to Congress, he mentioned that such a dome exists in Israel, in other places too, and should be in the United States. The president meant Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system, which the country has been successfully using to intercept rockets and shells since 2011. In general, Israel has three main layers of defense across its territory, especially in the densely populated coastal, central, and northern areas. The Iron Dome has proven its incredible effectiveness many times over the years. It relies on a powerful network of radars, computers, and interceptor missiles, but there's one catch. The system's designed to intercept threats up close. Along with the Iron Dome, Israel also has two other setups called David's Sling and Arrow that take on larger ballistic missiles. But defense against external attacks in the U.S. and Israel are two completely different strategies. These countries just can't be compared in size. Israel's area is about 7,700 square miles, while the United States covers over 3.5 million square miles. Also, the Iron Dome usually only shoots down incoming weapons at a range of about 10 miles. To protect the entire United States with the same coverage, you'd need tens of thousands of defensive batteries. What's more, Israel currently doesn't have opponents with nuclear weapons. The U.S. situation is totally different. Israel's territory is mostly flat desert, which is easy to defend, unlike the U.S. The Iron Dome mainly shoots down rockets and shells fired from border areas, so they're not very long range, but rockets that could potentially hit the U.S. are a whole different story. These are huge, powerful intercontinental ballistic missiles that fly into space and come back to Earth at hypersonic speeds. The Iron Dome would never be able to intercept those. On the other hand, Trump talks not about the Iron Dome, but the Golden Dome. That's actually no coincidence, according to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Iron Dome is a trademark owned by an Israeli defense company, so the U.S. Department of Defense renamed the program from Iron Dome for America to Golden Dome for America. Well, for now, the current U.S. National Missile Defense System looks more like a wire mesh than an Iron Dome. It includes 44 long-range interceptors stationed in California and Alaska, Like I said, this setup was chosen because of North Korea. The U.S. also has hundreds of interceptor missiles placed on ships or on mobile ground units, originally designed to deal with short and medium-range air and missile threats. In theory, they might be able to help protect the country from long-range intercontinental ballistic missiles or submarine-launched ballistic missiles. But here, choosing the right placement is key, because the wire mesh, so to speak, isn't stretched everywhere. Yeah, and overall, it's about time to upgrade it so the system covers all phases of missile trajectories. It requires deploying different sensors on various platforms, on land, at sea, in the air, and in space. That is, the U.S. already has a wide range of sensors and interceptors all over the world and in space, primarily to protect the U.S. and its allies from ballistic missiles. But that's not enough. They need even more, so the sensors can also detect new missiles, hypersonic ones, for example, or those that can maneuver instead of just flying a set path. Unfortunately, so far, the White House and the Defense Department reps have given few real details about what the Golden Dome will actually look like. It's still in the concept phase, and the statements go like, there will be so many layers on land, sea, and space, and the system will be able to intercept any missile no matter where it's coming from. That said, the newly appointed head of the program, Space Force General Michael Getline, said the Golden Dome will be based on existing systems that are mostly aimed at traditional ICBMs. The new system will add several layers that will also be able to detect and defend against cruise missiles and other threats, including intercepting them before launch or at different stages of flight. Sure, not everyone shares that kind of fighting optimism. Even though missile defense tech has been around for decades, the kind of shield Trump wants to build would be way more complex and expensive. Experts think the key part of the new missile defense system will likely be space-based interceptors, and a few defense companies have already shown interest in the project. You just can't do without space tech if the goal is to shoot down powerful intercontinental ballistic missiles during launch. That phase only lasts 3 to 5 minutes, so you've got to act really fast. The idea is to put satellites in orbit that could spot missiles as they leave Earth and then shoot them down right at the start of their flight. But some plans are even more ambitious. The next-gen Golden Dome system will probably rely on directed energy weapons down the line, like high-powered lasers and strong microwaves to destroy incoming rockets. Honestly, though, what strikes me as boldest is Trump's claim that the Golden Dome could be finished by the end of his term.
It should be fully operational before the end of my term.
At the same time, the total cost of the project will eventually reach $175 billion, including the initial $25 billion already invested. Bold? Very bold. Especially considering that the U.S. Congressional Budget Office totally disagrees with those numbers. They estimate the potential cost at $542 billion over 20 years just for the space systems. Experts say the overall cost could eventually swallow up a huge chunk of the U.S. defense budget. And creating a Golden Dome is going to take way more time than just until 2028, when Trump's next presidential term would end. But let's suppose for a second that deadlines and cost don't matter. Would the Golden Dome really give 100% protection? I mean, look, Israel's Iron Dome system is considered the most effective of its kind in the world. But even it isn't 100% effective, and now and then the Iron Dome has been overwhelmed by massive attacks using a huge number of cheap rockets and shells. So it's unlikely that any missile defense dome will ever offer 100% protection, even a golden one, or a diamond, or platinum one. A more important goal here is to achieve a kind of deterrence, similar to the Cold War standoff with the Soviet Union, which was based on nuclear weapons. All the new weapons that the Golden Dome will be protecting against are super expensive. The U.S. is trying to change the enemy's thinking so much that they decide it's just not worth it to launch their pricey missiles at the U.S., simply because there's a chance that this expensive missile won't hit its target. But then why should anyone be afraid of the Golden Dome? Not long ago, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning told reporters that the Golden Dome plan raises the risk of turning space into a battlefield. To counter this missile defense system, a potential adversary might try to destroy or disable American satellites. A few countries already have missiles that can shoot down satellites, and they might also try to jam or hack the U.S. satellite systems. Moscow and Beijing have already said they'll start talks on preventing weapons from being deployed in space, and they've pledged to counter any policies or actions aimed at gaining military dominance up there. The original sentence was actually way longer, but you get the idea. I also came across an opinion that the Golden Dome might technically violate the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, which bans placing nuclear or any other weapons of mass destruction in space. Yeah, the system doesn't really seem to be about that, but just the very idea of space warfare honestly sounds terrifying. And all of us human beings have the right to be afraid of it. You owe me a like. See you later.